This was supposed to be a fresh start. A home filled with love, laughter, and dreams of the future. But instead, it became the backdrop of a crime so shocking that even the most seasoned detectives were left speechless. On the night of October 14, 2023, in an upscale California neighborhood, a frantic 911 call shattered the silence. A husband, his voice trembling, told dispatchers that his wife wasn't breathing. He claimed it was an accident, that she had fallen, that he had tried to save her. But when first responders arrived, the scene told a different story. Lisa Carter, 38 years old, was found lifeless in their master bedroom. Her body bore the unmistakable signs of something far more violent than a fall. Bruises on her arms and neck, a deep gash on her forehead, and a shattered phone hidden behind the dresser. Her husband, James Carter, stood nearby, barely holding it together, repeating over and over again that she had been drinking, that she had lost her balance. But something was off. The first responders knew it. The neighbors who had heard muffled screams that night knew it. And soon, the entire country would know it too. This case wasn't just another domestic dispute gone wrong. It was something more. A perfect marriage, a beautiful home, and a husband with everything to lose. But behind the walls of that dream house, secrets had been building up for years. Lisa had been trying to leave. She had been making plans. But James had other ideas. This is the story of a woman who almost escaped, a man who thought he could get away with murder, and a home that should have been a sanctuary until it became a crime scene. Stay with me, because the truth behind this case is twisted, chilling, and more calculated than anyone ever imagined. James and Lisa Carter seemed like the perfect couple. They had just moved into a beautiful, expensive home in an upscale California neighborhood. A $1.2 million dream house with a modern design, a swimming pool, and a view that made their friends jealous. Lisa had always dreamed of having a home like this, a place where she and James could build their future together. But what happens when the dream turns into a nightmare? Because behind the perfectly painted walls of their home, something dark was growing. Something no one saw coming. Lisa was 38 years old, a beloved elementary school teacher known for her kindness and warmth. She wasn't just a teacher. She was the kind of person who made her students feel special. Parents adored her, coworkers admired her, and friends cherished her loyalty. She was the type of person who would drop everything if someone needed help, the one who always remembered birthdays, and the friend who checked in when life got tough. But in the last year, Lisa had changed. She was quieter. She missed social gatherings. Her bright personality seemed dimmed. Her best friend, Megan, noticed it first. "Lisa, are you okay? You don't seem like yourself," she had asked one evening. Lisa had forced a smile, but Megan could see something wasn't right. "Yeah, just a lot going on at home. James is stressed with work." It wasn't the words that worried Megan. It was the way Lisa said them. The hesitation, the nervous glance, the way she held onto her phone like she was afraid of missing a call. Lisa had never been secretive before, but now it felt like she was walking on eggshells. James, on the other hand, was 41 years old, a successful financial consultant who always seemed in control. He was the kind of man who walked into a room and commanded attention. Confident, well-spoken, and highly ambitious. To outsiders, James was charming and driven. But to those who knew him well, there was something unsettling beneath the surface. Lisa's family had never fully trusted him. They noticed how he would cut her off in conversations, how he would dismiss her opinions with a smirk, how he made decisions without including her. At first, it seemed harmless. Some men were just dominant personalities, right? But over time, the small things became big things. James controlled their money. Lisa, who once had financial freedom, now had to ask before making purchases. He started deciding who she could spend time with, questioning her when she was out too long, and checking her phone messages. He had turned their marriage into a prison disguised as a home. Lisa's friends noticed the bruises first. Nothing obvious, just faint marks on her wrists, a small cut on her lip, things she quickly explained away. "Oh, I tripped over the dog's leash. I wasn't paying attention and bumped into the cabinet." The excuses came naturally, almost rehearsed. But Megan knew better. Something was wrong, And Lisa wasn't talking about it. The fights between James and Lisa were getting louder. Neighbors recalled hearing shouting late at night, the kind of yelling that made you pause and wonder if you should step in. But no one did. They figured it was just another marital argument, something that would blow over by morning. But it didn't. Lisa was tired of living in fear. She had started planning her escape. She reached out to a divorce attorney, secretly opened a separate bank account, and began looking at rental apartments. She wasn't going to be trapped forever. But there's one terrifying fact about abusive relationships. The most dangerous moment is when the victim decides to leave. James could feel it. He could sense her slipping away. And instead of letting her go, he made a choice that would change everything forever. Lisa never made it out of that house. She had been 1 week away from freedom. Her bags were nearly packed, her plans nearly finalized. But she never got the chance to start over. Because on the night of October 14th, 2023, in the very home that was supposed to be her safe place, Lisa Carter took her last breath. And James? He had a plan to cover it up. He thought he could explain it away. He thought no one would question his story. But what he didn't know was that the evidence was about to expose everything. Because when investigators stepped into that house, they saw the truth written all over the walls. It was a quiet, uneventful night in the neighborhood. Families were winding down, lights dimmed, the hum of California's suburbs settling into peaceful silence. But at exactly 10:37 p.m., that silence was shattered by a frantic 911 call from inside the Carter household. "My wife, she's not breathing." James Carter's voice was trembling, gasping between words. He sounded panicked, desperate, like a man trying to save the love of his life. She fell down the stairs. There's blood everywhere. I tried CPR, but she's not waking up. Dispatchers asked for more details. James's breathing was erratic, his words scattered. He claimed Lisa had been drinking heavily, that she tripped, hit her head, and lost consciousness. He begged them to send an ambulance immediately. The urgency in his voice was enough to trigger immediate response teams. Within minutes, paramedics and law enforcement were on their way. But when they arrived, nothing about the scene matched his story. The front door was slightly open when emergency responders stepped in. The house was dimly lit, eerily quiet except for James's muffled sobs coming from upstairs. Paramedics rushed in, following his voice to the master bedroom. And that's where they found her. Lisa Carter, motionless on the bedroom floor, eyes closed, skin pale. But something was wrong. James had told dispatchers that Lisa fell down the stairs, but she wasn't near the staircase. She was in their bedroom next to the bed, with bruising on her neck and a deep wound on her forehead. There were no signs of impact from a fall. No broken furniture. No blood near the staircase. But there was something else. Her phone, shattered, hidden behind the dresser, as if someone had tried to get rid of it. Paramedics checked her pulse. Nothing. She had been dead for at least an hour. One of the officers turned to James. "You said she just fell?" James, still sitting on the floor beside Lisa's body, nodded aggressively, tears streaming down his face. "Yes. She was drinking. She was unstable. She tripped. I tried to help, I swear." But the officers weren't convinced. And they were about to find even more reasons to question his story. Paramedics noticed faint hand-shaped bruises on Lisa's wrists, as if someone had grabbed her, held her down. There were small cuts on her lips, a bruise on her lower jaw, and a deep red mark circling her neck. This wasn't from a fall. One of the officers pulled James aside, asking him to walk through exactly what happened that night. James repeated the same story. Lisa had been drinking, she had lost balance, and she hit her head on the table before collapsing. But something didn't sit right. The lead investigator took a closer look at the crime scene. There were no overturned furniture pieces, no broken wine glasses, no spilled alcohol anywhere. Then, in the dim light of the room, he saw something near the closet. A faint handprint, smeared in blood, on the white wall. Lisa had fought back. James had called 911 at 10:37 p.m., but forensic experts later confirmed that Lisa had died closer to 9:15 p.m., over an hour before James made the call. So what had he been doing during that missing hour? Investigators searched Lisa's phone, which was found smashed behind the dresser. The tech team recovered her last attempted call at 9:20 p.m. Lisa had tried to call for help. The call never went through. The phone had been cut off mid-dial. Someone had stopped her. When officers confiscated James's phone and laptop, they found something chilling. His search history, just 2 nights before Lisa's death, included: how long does it take to strangle someone? How to stage an accidental fall? Can police retrieve deleted text messages? What is the quickest way to make someone unconscious? This wasn't panic Googling after an accident. This was premeditation. James had planned this. And now, the police had everything they needed to prove it. Forensic teams combed through the house, uncovering even more disturbing details. A broken glass candle on the bedroom floor, its shards covered in blood. A pillow with faint makeup smudges and traces of saliva. Lisa had likely been smothered before she died. The duffel bag in the garage, holding a set of torn bedsheets and James's bloody shirt. When James was brought in for questioning, officers presented him with the hard evidence. His reaction? Silence. No more fake tears. No more frantic excuses. Just cold, empty silence. And that's when detectives knew he was guilty. By the morning of October 15, 2023, James Carter was officially arrested on suspicion of first-degree murder. The neighbors, the media, the entire community was in shock. James? The successful financial guy? A murderer? But the truth had been hidden in plain sight for years. Lisa Carter had been trying to escape for months. She had been saving money, meeting with a lawyer, and planning to leave. But James knew that if she left, his control would be gone forever. So he made a deadly decision. James Carter was about to face the most important trial of his life. Prosecutors had overwhelming evidence against him. But would justice truly be served? Or would James find a way to manipulate the system, just like he manipulated Lisa for years? Because as shocking as the crime was, what happened next in the courtroom was even more unbelievable. The moment Lisa Carter's lifeless body was found in the bedroom, first responders knew something wasn't right. The bruises, the broken phone hidden behind the dresser, the bloodstains, none of it matched the story James Carter had told them. He was desperate, teary-eyed, and kept insisting that Lisa had been drinking, lost her balance, and fallen. But his words weren't enough to erase what the crime scene was screaming. Paramedics had seen accidents before. A slip down the stairs doesn't leave fingernail scratches on someone's arms, defensive wounds on their hands, or bruises in the shape of fingers wrapped around their throat. Lisa hadn't just fallen. She had fought for her life. The police had dealt with men like James before, men who cried when officers arrived, playing the part of the grieving husband. But the investigators weren't buying it. They separated James from the scene and took him to the station for questioning, while forensic experts began their search for the truth inside the Carter home. And it didn't take long for the lies to start unraveling. Investigators started where James claimed the accident happened. The staircase. If Lisa had fallen, there should have been signs of impact, a dent in the wall, broken furniture, blood trailing down the steps. But there was nothing. Not a single mark on the staircase, no trace of blood, no evidence that Lisa had even set foot there that night. Instead, the majority of blood evidence was found in the bedroom. That meant Lisa hadn't fallen. She had been attacked where she was found. Officers noticed faint smudges of blood on the closet door, as if someone had gripped the frame for support. And then they found a handprint, Lisa's handprint, smeared against the wall. She had tried to pull herself up. She had struggled. The more they examined the house, the clearer the picture became. Lisa had been cornered in the bedroom, and a violent struggle had taken place. And there was something else. Her shattered phone, deliberately hidden behind the dresser. Had Lisa tried to call for help? Detectives retrieved the phone, sent it for forensic analysis, and requested access to her phone records. When the results came back, everything changed. Lisa had tried to call 911 at 9:20 p.m., nearly an hour before James called for help. Lisa had dialed emergency services. But the call had lasted only 4 seconds before being disconnected. Someone had cut it off. Lisa had been alive and conscious at 9:20 p.m., trying to get help. And by the time James finally called 911 at 10:37 p.m., she was already dead. The timeline wasn't matching up. What had James been doing in that missing hour? Then came the most chilling discovery. Lisa's final text message. It had been sent to her best friend Megan just minutes before the interrupted 911 call. "He's getting worse. I think he knows I'm leaving. If something happens to me, don't believe what he says." Lisa knew she was in danger. She had been trying to leave. And James wasn't going to let her go. As detectives gathered evidence from the scene, Lisa's autopsy report arrived. The medical examiner's findings left no doubt. Lisa hadn't died from a fall. She had been strangled. There were deep bruises on her neck, consistent with hands applying pressure for an extended period. Lisa's injuries showed signs of defensive wounds, scratches on her arms and hands, proving she had fought back. There was also evidence that she had been smothered before the final attack. A pillow on the bed had traces of makeup, saliva, and faint bloodstains, suggesting James had first tried to suffocate her before using his hands to finish the job. This was no accident. This was cold-blooded murder. When detectives sat James down for questioning, they let him talk. And he did. He sobbed. He stuck to his original story. And he acted confused when they told him the evidence wasn't matching his version of events. "She had too much to drink. She fell. I tried to save her. Why don't you believe me?" The lead detective leaned forward and slid a piece of paper across the table, a copy of Lisa's phone record, showing her attempted 911 call. If Lisa fell and lost consciousness, why did she try to call for help before she died? James's face went pale. He had no answer. Then came the real blow. The forensic team had analyzed his Google search history. Just 2 nights before Lisa's death, James had searched. How long does it take to strangle someone? How to stage a fall accident? Can police see deleted messages? What is the quickest way to make someone unconscious? This was premeditation. James wasn't acting out of panic. He had planned this. And now, detectives had everything they needed to prove it. As officers continued searching the house, a neighbor came forward with something disturbing. They had seen James leave the house around 3 a.m., hours after Lisa's death, carrying a heavy black duffel bag. When he returned minutes later, the bag was gone. Detectives retraced his steps and found what they were looking for. The bag, tossed into a dumpster miles away. Inside they found a blood-stained pillowcase, torn bedsheets with DNA evidence, Lisa's missing wedding ring, ripped off her finger during the struggle, a pair of James's sweatpants with Lisa's blood on them. The case against James was now airtight. On the morning of October 15, 2023, just hours after Lisa's funeral, James Carter was arrested for first-degree murder. As officers cuffed him, he didn't fight back. He had spent years controlling every aspect of Lisa's life. But now, he was no longer in control. And yet, the biggest fight was still ahead, the trial that would decide his fate. Because while the evidence was overwhelming, James had one last trick up his sleeve. And what happened in the courtroom next? No one saw it coming. For years, James Carter had been the man who had it all. A high-paying job, a beautiful wife, a big house in an upscale California neighborhood. On the outside, everything seemed perfect. But what no one knew was that behind the closed doors of their dream home, James's world was falling apart. Lisa Carter had always believed in love. She had married James thinking he was her forever, her partner, the man who would stand beside her through everything. But over time, she began to realize something was wrong. What she thought was love was never really love at all. It was control. At first, it was subtle. James would decide where they went for dinner, what Lisa should wear, how she should spend her weekends. It seemed harmless, just little things. But slowly, those small decisions turned into rules. He wanted to know where she was at all times. He needed her to text him back immediately. He questioned her friendships, telling her that some people weren't good for their relationship. And Lisa, trying to keep the peace, listened. She cut off old friends, stopped going out as much, and gave James more control over her life. But control was never enough for James. The real turning point came when Lisa started talking about getting her independence back. She wanted to go back to school to further her teaching career. She wanted to manage her own finances again, something she had let James take over after they got married. She had plans for herself, for her future. And James? He didn't like that. Lisa's confidence was growing again. She wasn't the same quiet woman who always agreed with him. She was finding her voice. And James saw it as a threat. Then came the biggest blow to his control. Lisa wanted a divorce. James didn't react immediately. He didn't explode in rage or scream at her. Instead, he played the role of the loving husband, telling Lisa he understood, that they could work things out. But behind the scenes, he was already planning his next move. James was in trouble. What no one knew was that James Carter was drowning in financial debt. Despite working as a financial consultant, he had made risky investments that had failed miserably. He was behind on mortgage payments, maxed out their credit cards, and secretly taken out loans that Lisa didn't know about. And then there was Lisa's life insurance policy. Just months before, Lisa had updated her policy, making James the sole beneficiary. If anything happened to her, he would receive $1.5 million. That was his way out. He had built a life that depended on Lisa staying with him, but now she was slipping through his fingers. If she left him, he would lose everything. His house, his lifestyle, his image of success. So James made a decision. If Lisa wanted to leave, she never would. It wasn't just about money. It was about control, about winning. James didn't see Lisa as a partner anymore. He saw her as his possession. And when he realized he was losing that possession, he made sure no one else could have her. Lisa had thought she was finally getting out. She was 1 week away from leaving him. She had started packing, reaching out to family, and looking for apartments. She had even met with a lawyer to start divorce proceedings. But she never got the chance to start her new life, because James had already decided how her story would end. On the night of October 14th, in the very home she once thought was her dream house, Lisa Carter was murdered by the man who promised to love her forever. And James? He thought he could get away with it. But what he didn't know was that the investigation was about to expose every single one of his lies. James Carter walked into the courtroom looking like a broken man. His once confident posture was gone, replaced by a slumped figure dressed in a navy blue suit. His hands were cuffed, his face tired. And yet, there was still something about him. Something cold. Something calculating. He wasn't crying. He wasn't remorseful. He was just waiting to see if he could get away with it. Lisa Carter's family sat in the front row, eyes fixed on the man who had taken their daughter, their sister, their friend. They had waited for this moment. They had listened to his lies, watched him pretend to be the grieving husband. And now they were here to see him answer for what he had done. The prosecution wasted no time. They painted a clear picture of James, a man who thrived on control, who couldn't handle losing Lisa, and who saw murder as his only way out. They laid out the timeline of events leading up to Lisa's death, showing how James had planned everything. They started with his Google searches, clear evidence that this wasn't an accident or a crime of passion. Days before Lisa's murder, James had looked up. How long does it take to strangle someone? How to stage an accidental fall? Can police retrieve deleted text messages? Then they introduced the forensic evidence, Lisa's bruises, the defensive wounds on her arms, the handprints smeared in blood on the wall. They played the 911 call, letting the jury hear James's fake panic, his shaky voice, the way he tried to sound like a man desperate to save his wife. But the most damning piece of evidence was Lisa's final text message. Just minutes before she died, Lisa had texted her best friend, "He's getting worse. I think he knows I'm leaving. If something happens to me, don't believe what he says." The courtroom was silent. Lisa knew. She knew she was in danger. And yet, no one was able to save her. James's defense team tried to spin a different story. They argued that James was under stress, that Lisa had been drinking heavily that night, that maybe she really did fall. They suggested that Lisa's injuries could have been caused by her own instability. They tried to make James look like a devoted husband who had simply made a mistake. But no one was buying it. The prosecutor turned the attention back to James's actions after Lisa's death. Why had he waited an hour to call 911? Why did he remove Lisa's wedding ring and throw it in a dumpster miles away? Why did he try to dispose of blood-stained evidence in the middle of the night? The jury listened carefully as the evidence stacked up, one piece after another. Every lie James had told was falling apart right in front of them. Then came the moment that broke him. A neighbor took the stand. He had heard screaming from the Carter house that night, but didn't call the police because he had heard them argue before. But then he added something chilling. I heard Lisa yell, "James, stop. You're hurting me." And then it just went silent. The words hung in the air. James, who had remained stone-faced for most of the trial, shifted uncomfortably. The jury didn't need anything else. The case against James Carter was airtight. After 6 days of testimony, the jury left the courtroom to deliberate. No one expected a long wait. The evidence was overwhelming. The lies had been exposed. And now it was time for justice. For hours later, the jury returned. Everyone in the courtroom held their breath as the verdict was read. We, the jury, find the defendant, James Carter, guilty of first-degree murder. Lisa's family broke down in tears. The room was filled with quiet sobs, a mix of grief and relief. James, for the first time, looked truly afraid. He wasn't in control anymore. The judge didn't hold back. Life in prison. No parole. No second chances. James Carter, the man who thought he could control everything, would now spend the rest of his life behind bars. Lisa Carter's story had ended in tragedy, but her voice had been heard. Justice had finally been served. Lisa Carter's story is heartbreaking, but it's not just a story, it's a warning. She was a kind, loving woman who gave her heart to someone she thought she could trust. But love should never come with fear, control, or violence. The saddest part? Lisa saw the danger coming. She tried to leave. She reached out to friends. She even sent a message just before she died, telling someone that if anything happened to her, they shouldn't believe James's lies. She knew she was in trouble, but by the time anyone could help, it was too late. Her case is a painful reminder that abuse doesn't always start with bruises. It starts with control. The little things, isolating a partner from friends, making them feel guilty for having independence, monitoring their every move. Many victims don't even realize they're in danger until it's too late. Lisa wasn't weak. She wasn't helpless. She was a victim of a man who believed he owned her. If there's one thing to take away from this, it's that red flags should never be ignored. If someone you love starts acting differently, if they seem scared, withdrawn, or like they're constantly making excuses, pay attention. And if you're in a situation where you feel trapped, know that there is always a way out. You are not alone, and there are people who will help. Lisa Carter should have had the chance to walk away and start over. No one should ever have to fight for their freedom in their own home. Let her story be a reminder that love should never hurt. And when the signs are there, we have to listen before it's too late. Lisa Carter's story isn't just another crime case. It's a wake-up call. Somewhere, right now, someone is in the same situation Lisa was in. They feel trapped, scared, and unsure if anyone will believe them. Maybe it's someone you know. Maybe it's you. Abuse thrives in silence, but it can be stopped if we recognize the signs and take action. If something feels wrong, don't ignore it. Speak up. Reach out. Because sometimes the difference between life and death is whether or not someone pays attention. Lisa's story ended in tragedy, but someone else's doesn't have to.